I'm going to let Michael do the moderating.
Sure.
And please ask your questions. Alan and I will try and make sure you get there. So who's the first person who has a question? There we go. Here we go.
So operators seem really cool. I'm playing around with templates and pipelines and Jenkins and thinking, wow, I really need to be careful that I don't create a mess here with lots of different templates that do relatively the same thing. And it seems like operators are a solution to that. I also talked to the OS storage guys, and they said they have an operator. We're running 3.11. Can you use operators in 3.11, or is this a 4.0 feature?
Go ahead. No, Mike.
So yeah, you can. What you won't have in 3.11 is that experience with the hub. So it's still called Marketplace, and it's a little bit simpler, but yes, you can use it. And as of today, we don't have any operators that have OpenShift 4 as a minimum version. So yeah, you can continue to use that, and that should work just fine. It's just the experience that we've shown will look a little bit different on the 3.11 cluster because the console has been remodeled a little bit. The UI screens look a little bit different, but the basic functionality is still there, right? You still have the OLM present, and you still have what's now called the Operator Hub, giving you an easy end-user-facing entry point into getting an operator deployed and use it.
What we tell most people is that the OL and the operator lifecycle manager that you can click into and see a lifecycle of an operator and control it, that is only in tech preview, dev preview on 3.11. But the fact that you are running an operator is completely supported on 3.11. It's just that extra benefit is not there yet. Also, the SDK that these gentlemen wrote is still in tech preview in 3.11, and then that goes GA in 4.0.
This one is close to me, and then we'll come down to you next.
Yeah. Okay, another operator's framework question. First, there was the template service broker. Then there was the Ansible service broker. Am I right in thinking that operators framework can be thought of as a logical extension of that lifeline?
We do think that is the trajectory that we're on. The service brokers in general were originally written to bring content that lives outside of the platform into the platform, right? That was the first conception of it. We kind of took that over, and we also used them with the template service broker because we like the binding. We like the fact that you could take different templates and use the service broker to bind them, and that's why we brought that for on-cluster solutions. Operators are right at the cusp of being used for off-platform services. Amazon has written one for their service broker, so they themselves, without our influence, are replacing their service broker with an operator implementation. So we think that's where most of the community and the sort of industry is going to move to. We're going to maintain the service broker interface for a couple more releases at least, so that takes us into 2020, into 2020 into 2021. So we like the service broker, it's there. We need to figure out how to merge the operator with the binding that we get from the service broker. That's our next big project.
I'll maybe just add that if you've invested in Ansible playbook bundles, APBs, for deploying things through the service catalog, it can be a fairly straightforward transition to an Ansible-based operator. So that's worth looking at.
All right. With the current/old web console for OpenShift 3x, there's documentation and the possibility to add UI elements, add theming, stuff like that. In the preview, the new console, I have not seen any possibility for customization of the UI. Is that something still on the roadmap? Is that intended? Is there documentation somewhere hidden?
Yeah. So, and if you don't know it, when we moved to the 4.0, we rewrote everything in React. And so it was a pretty significant core change in the technology when we moved to that user interface. What you're mentioning is we don't have all the documentation set up for that move yet. We are totally going to do that. At the latest, you'll see it in around May timeframe. Yep. Over there.
Shout it out. Hello. I was wondering if with the cryo engine, we can achieve things like mount propagation. As you mentioned before, the file system or the operative system is immutable. So can we achieve this kind of functionality that we have with Docker now?
You can achieve, yes. I'm not sure what you're talking about mount propagation, but are you just talking about whether or not if I mount something in the host, it'll show up inside the container?
Yeah.
Yeah, all that functionality. Yeah, we're the guys that wrote that stuff, so yeah, we make sure it works.
Cool. And if you don't mind about the operator question, a lot of the operators require to create their own namespace and all these things, which means that we end up having security issues about who can create cluster roles and all this stuff. Is there a way to do it properly without giving too much access to one operator that actually it might not be open source, so I don't know what is in there or what is actually doing?
So in 4.0, there's a concept coming out that we call operator groups. So the idea is that all operators in OpenShift get deployed to a particular namespace, and they, with the RBAC data that comes from all those manifests that I've talked about that accompany the operator, which OLM will use and make into roles, they will have access in that namespace to these APIs. What they will also be able to do is they will be able to listen to events that are listed in this operator groups. So while an operator may only be deployed in a single namespace, it can react upon group version kind objects being created in other namespaces. That's the whole purpose of an operator group. Our default right now is that we have an operator group that basically says all namespaces. Right? So whenever I create an etcd object in any namespace, the operator would take notice of that and take action. And in the future, we will have a little bit more granular access to that and say only a particular list of namespaces will have access to that operator. But all the operators themselves, the deployments, the pods that run the operator, they will be in a namespace called OpenShift operators.
Any more?
It's a two-parter. What's the roadmap for Knative in terms of upcoming versions? And where in that roadmap can I get Knative linked to machine set auto-scaling, linked to like lightweight VMs like Firecracker in the underlying infrastructure, so I can have genuine capacity on demand from the underlying infrastructure managed through OpenShift?
Great. Want to talk about Knative first?
About Knative, I'm not fully sure because it's not my domain, but there is still, I guess, is planned for the follow, right?
Yes, definitely. So Knative, I think it was on one of the slides at the bottom. It was talking about it going tech preview in 4.1, and then 4.2 or 4.3. That takes you at the end of this year, around the end of this year. We think it might be production ready. For those of you who don't know, Knative is very new in the upstream Kubernetes, and it takes a while to get it through alpha to beta to stable and whatnot. The lightweight VMs is an interesting question. We don't necessarily believe that's the only path forward, right? We think that we can solve a lot of the security issues with just plain containers once we get root-owned containers running very well on Kubernetes.
So you are,
I guess 15 minutes to provision a new machine,
right.
I can hardly start and stop it on demand.
Yeah.
But are you talking about generating a new node on the fly or generating a Firecracker separated container? So if you're talking about creating a new node, I'm not sure if Kubernetes has any concept of that at this point. I mean, KubeVirt is a different thing.
Yeah.
But it's coming, and we're incorporating it quickly.
Right. So I would hope so. I've always thought that Kubernetes understands that I'm running out of nodes or running out of workloads, so I should be able to generate a new node. And it's always been separated out that say OpenStack is in charge of generating nodes and Kubernetes is generating containers, but I think the two should eventually merge into Kubernetes.
Yeah, so on your path, I think you're asking using Knative for serverless and having serverless trigger an out of resources and then generating a node. Right. Yeah.
Well, that should be able to add more nodes to the cluster if it's running short.
Right.
And get rid of them when they're not needed anymore.
Yeah. We just don't, in that storyline, we have that storyline ready for the end of 2019. You'll get the tech preview pieces of the Knative and the serverless around the August timeframe, probably. We just don't have a commitment to the Firecracker, those types of VMs. We think we can solve that with that aspect of it with containers.
Yeah. The problem with whether it's Firecracker or Kata or whoever's launching, we really need to support multiple different clouds. And when I'm talking clouds, I'm talking public clouds, I'm talking VMware, I'm talking hypervisor on top of my Mac. I mean, it's X-Hive. So it's really hard to say, there's going to be one. I mean, right. I mean, Amazon wants to get Firecrackers, Amazon's new way of doing lightweight containers, really. I mean, that's what they're, and frankly, I want to see Amazon make the transition that Microsoft has before I fully buy into them, doing an open source project and really understanding an open source project. So I hold back on whether Firecracker is the right way forward. But I think that there'll be equivalent ways that we need to do this in all different clouds and OpenStack and VMware and.
We found the latest version of OpenShift 3 harder to install on an air-gapped environment than previous versions. So with your enhanced installer for version 4, how is that going to be compatible with truly air-gapped environments?
So it'll come in the 4.1 timeframe. Everything that we showed, you can establish your own registry, right? You don't have to use Quay to house these containers. You could download them, set up your own registry, whatever the case may be, and then point our metadata files to those local areas. In the 4.1 timeframe, we'll give you the prescription on how to do that and how to be air-gapped completely to pull that down. So that's around the May timeframe, end of May, June timeframe.
Thank you.
Also about your roadmap, you said that 4.0 will come out in April.
Yeah.
But then it will only support AWS, I assume?
Yes.
So when should I plan to run 4.0 on bare metal or on-prem?
Yeah, the pecking order right now is to go out on AWS in towards the end of April, then about 30 days later, release 4.1. So we're not following the traditional release pattern anymore. Now we've switched to the Tectonic implementation, and I talked earlier about how you can switch to the latest or the beta channels. It's your choice now. You're going to see us consuming Kubernetes versions a lot faster than we ever have. So I'll go out on Kube 1.12 in April, and in May I'll switch to Kube 1.13. And then around August timeframe, I'll go to Kube 1.14. So we're going to be going through them quite quickly. On the infrastructure, the pecking order is to get AWS done, and then in the May timeframe, do bare metal in VMware. And then in that next one, that August timeframe, do GCP and Azure.
Is there going to be a direct migration path from 3 to 4?
So this is a very interesting question. When we started looking at engineering the in-place upgrade, we went out and talked to a lot of customers, and a lot of customers said they don't like the serial upgrade. They don't like the fact that if they're on 3.7, in order to get to 3.11, they have to upgrade to 3.9, then upgrade to 3.10, then upgrade to 3.11. And that's everybody's Kubernetes distribution. That's just the upstream API boundaries. That's how it makes you do it. At the same time, they told us that once they do get a cluster deployed, they're afraid to touch it. Like they're afraid to breathe on it because they don't have the tools or the utilities to snapshot a cluster and redeploy it, like to gather up some of the storage PVs and sort of the metadata involved in that, the role binds, who's allowed to log in, things of that nature. We saw some presentations from some storage vendors here that were solving that aspect of the problem, which was great to see. So we decided instead of doing an in-place upgrade utility, we're going to work on a migration utility. We're going to allow you to take a sort of snapshot of your cluster, the projects, the applications, some of the metadata that was hard to configure and set up and remember that you've set it up, and we'll allow you to restore it onto a new install of a cluster, and then we're playing around with storing it to backup using the same equipment, blow it away, install the new cluster on the same equipment, and then bringing that back up into it. So we're working on those utilities. For the most part, since a lot of the customer base is a little further behind, this migration utility will come out in the July, August timeframe, because a lot of those particular customers wouldn't consume a 4.0 release anyways. So we think we're on par with when they want to move around that July, August timeframe.
Interesting to say applications as well. That's interesting.
Yeah, so we're going to build off the Kubernetes Arc project that Heptio started, and that started in the application area with the projects, and it ignores everything else, so we have to build that into it.
Just a quick follow-up, sorry, from that migration. Is it going to be a minimum 3 version?
We want CRDs, so it's probably 3.9 or higher.
What are your thoughts on GitOps, and do you see that natively supported in OpenShift in the future?
GitOps.
So this, I think it's only coined like about 12 months ago by Weaveworks, I think. So the idea is rather than you using the OC command lines and Helm and things like that, you just have a Git repository of what the latest version of all your Helm charts is and all your variables, and there's an operator in your cluster that goes off to your Git repository and then reconciles that with what the current state of the cluster is. So you can only make changes to your OpenShift cluster by committing to your Git repo.
Well, I think a lot of customers use similar techniques, not necessarily Git, in that their touch points are controlled in some way, some version SCM management solution. So it isn't necessarily something we haven't seen before, but it's also not necessarily something we have to help do. You know, those primitives or interfaces are there in Kubernetes for you to achieve that without us coding anything for you.
I've seen a lot of excellent work today regarding operators and how I see it superseding templating, but also superseding Helm. Given that the community is refactoring Helm to new pillar and the need for privilege parts, where do you see Helm playing in your ecosystem in the short term? Will Operator SDK continue to be superseding Helm or being the interface for Helm charts? Or should we continue just using Operator SDK and ignore Helm for OpenShift, given that there's these two in parallel, but Operator SDK seems to be your preferred way of Helm charts?
So I wouldn't say we are superseding that idea, right? So there will still be a type of customer that is very accustomed to the way Helm did things and will stay like that. And there's also a very large ecosystem of Helm charts out there, probably much larger than we have OpenShift templates today. What we do with the SDK, as you have seen in the presentation before, is we make it very easy to turn a Helm chart into an operator and make that seamlessly blend in with the rest of the framework, like Operator Lifecycle Manager and Operator Metering, right? So I think on OpenShift, you will receive the best integration using that, but you can continuously build upon the innovation that happens in the Helm ecosystem by using the SDK to update your operators from the newest charts.
So it's interesting short term. We go wherever the content goes. Wherever format has the most content, we chase it. And that's exactly why we got rid of gears and went to Docker containers. And that's why we support, we allow you to run Helm. It's not like it's not supported. We just want you to understand that we're not going to deliver it and we're not going to fix the security issues with it. But it totally works on OpenShift. Short term, these guys have this awesome command line with the Operator SDK where you can convert any Helm chart into an operator with just a little bit of editing, like even I can do it. And then that deploys in a tillerless manner. It uses the CRD function to replace tiller, and that's today, right now, you can achieve that. I think looking ahead, we will continue to partake in that Helm community because there's a lot of content out there in the world that's written in Helm. So we want to make sure you're happy with our platform and it's performing just like anybody else's Kubernetes. So we'll still protect that investment for you.
Right. So regarding migration, would this include cluster data migration?
What?
Cluster storage. Will migration from 3 to 4 will include the procedure where it will include cluster storage migration?
So the premise of the code right now is to be agnostic. So to use utilities like tar to pull from the PV and then redeploy into the new PV. But in particular to OpenShift container storage, which Gluster is a component of, we are working on something to help migrate, should you choose, from Gluster to Ceph. So that's another project that's kind of bundled into the migration project that I'm talking about. So that could be of interest to you.
Will OpenShift 4 still have the tight integration with Jenkins that you get in OpenShift 3?
Yes, definitely. Yep. You know, the Jenkins one's an issue, or not an issue, it's an interesting problem to solve. When we wanted to, every deployment we've ever experienced, the customer brings up a CI/CD component to it, right? It's these worlds are very much connected. And we didn't want to create something new in that industry. That's like a $10 billion industry. That industry did not need another CI/CD solution, right? So we wanted to make sure that we picked an open source winner in that area, and that was obviously Jenkins, but we also wanted to make sure we didn't cut off the Bamboo and all the other Concourse solutions out there. So that Jenkins file to us becomes that integration point. So you can use, as a user, the Jenkins file to call out to other CI/CD solutions that you may own, and then you'll still see the pipeline movement in your project. So it was kind of like use it as an interface, but also use it as your solution if you don't have a solution. And we'll continue to develop on that. If you want to get in front of that and see where we're going, it's OpenShift.io. We're going to be taking a lot of their innovations that they've done with that integration and start shipping it into OpenShift 4.
Yeah, so questions about OpenShift 4 and RHEL and CentOS, or no, CoreOS and CentOS. How is OKD going to be tracking this? And can you talk a little bit about what operating system, are you going to run this on RHEL, or is it running on CoreOS and 4 and things like that?
Yeah.
So as far as OKD, the current thinking is that it's just going to be Fedora CoreOS. It would be the platform for running OKD on top of a CoreOS-based platform. And as of last week, I don't know if there's going to be a CentOS version of it. As far as the Red Hat version is totally tied to OpenShift, so you can't go and use a Red Hat CoreOS for general, running of containers. It's tied. You have to get it through OpenShift, through an OpenShift license. It's not going to be generally approved to be used by, anybody with a RHEL contract.
So there's, we can't talk about this yet, but tune in May. There's some very exciting news happening at the summit in Boston around this area. So definitely tune in May.
Did I reveal something?
No.
And we recorded it.
All right, I also have a question regarding Jenkins, and that is, are you working on creating a new agent running Golang and operators SDK built into the agent?
Was it to develop Go, like a runtime?
Yeah, because we want to build the operators, of course, on Jenkins and not on a desktop. So right now, we of course create our own agent with Go and so on. But do you know if you're working on creating one like Maven, and what else kind of Jenkins agents you have?
I don't know anything about that area. Okay, we can get back to you on that one.
Yeah, or I can submit one.
Yep.
Or you could write the operator.
If you can't comment, I'll understand, but will IBM put the same level of commitment in as you've already got?
What was the question?
Yeah. Will IBM maintain the same level of commitment that you currently have?
Will IBM? Why, did you hear something? We can't copy on that, comment on that, because it might affect the stock price. So no. We don't know. We have no idea what's going to happen. So they didn't, but hopefully they're not wasting $34 billion by buying us to kill us.
Just my little committee, which is devsecops.bcs.org, has an IBM on it, and we've already done some open tin work. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I'll only comment on the stuff that's already been put out into the public by IBM themselves. It's known that this product set will end up in the cloud BU over at IBM, and that's where they have their IBM Cloud, their ICP, they have their middleware products. But we will be run as a separate entity, and we will report up through our existing management chains all the way to our CEO. They've also said in the public that they really view us as a way to achieve open source prowess finally, right? IBM probably spends more than we do on open source, and yet we're better known as doing open source than IBM. And they really want to merge all that into Red Hat and put all that wood behind that arrow.
Thank you for clarifying, because in the past it was like a tiny jowl in the corner of IBM, and it just went in and they were the open source crowd.
Yeah.
So presumably you're now on steroids. So
But it gives
you a
them
future.
It really gives them a brand to put behind that. So that can be known as Red Hat at IBM, all the open source initiatives. So that's a pretty exciting area for us.
You mentioned the operations. What's the licensing issues associated with that? Is it the user's responsibility? Because you had Dynatrace there.
Yes, that's directed at me. So yeah, we are going to have a model for commercial offerings there, which require a license. So yes, this has been thought of, and we will have operators that require some sort of enterprise subscription or license in order to be able to use the software. So that's something that the maintainers of these operators will be able to configure in the backend system that is available to them to actually publicize their proprietary operators, or commercial operators, I should say. And then they will have options to select from whether or not that is a license-based model. And that's where also operator metering comes in, because we need to be able to measure usage of that in order to provide capacity-based payment models.
Yeah.
It's the same thing there.
That's what, and just to reiterate, we don't want to be the sort of commercial brokerage house. We don't want the ISVs coming to us to get their cut of the money that the user spent. So the operator framework itself has everything the ISV needs to succeed to have that relationship directly with the customer.
A quick question. Talking about migration, you mentioned that you're moving from Gluster to Ceph. Are you still going to be supporting Gluster in 4.0, like CRS and CMS?
Yeah, to be clear, it isn't like we're replacing Gluster with Ceph. I'm just saying that was, since we own that product set, that was one of the migration strategies that customers have asked for. And so that's one that we're coding to. But yes, Gluster is still there in 4.0. Yep.
Any more? One here. One more question?
One kind of niche one, and someone's already mentioned IBM, so they've mentioned that elephant in the room. So I may want to run IBM software inside OpenShift. So, kind of both worlds. Will that management of the operators manage the licensing of that software, just like anything else, or is that something specific that's quite difficult to do? I know they use PVUs and all sorts of complicated stuff.
So right now, if you were to do it today, the supported integration is to take what's called the ICP, and ICP is a big name that means 100 different things, but a component of that is at the very top of the middleware stack over there, and it gives you a user interface, and it gives you a plugin to a CI/CD framework. IBM wants you to download that and run that on top of OpenShift with a Helm component. And that's fully documented, has a user guide, has the whole 9 yards on it. So that's completely supported by both Red Hat and IBM today. So you can do that right now. Future-wise, like Dan mentioned, we're both publicly traded companies, and we're not allowed to have meetings yet with each other. So we haven't talked at that granular level. Pricing is not expected to change. The only thing that we're engineering and working on is really how you consume subscriptions. Right now, you use this utility called Subscription Manager that's been in RHEL since the beginning of time, right? And it's starting to show its wear and tear in this particular category where you're going to be auto scaling and auto removing nodes. And so we're thinking of clever ways how we can do that subscription management through the master. So the nodes don't have to have that intelligence. The master is keeping track of everything and telling us what the consumption is. So that's a project that we're working on, but pricing is not expected to change.
Oh, another question here. Good. Keep coming.
The operator framework, once again. Question about CloudForms. So CloudForms as metering at this point, or chargeback, that's now moved into the operator framework. Also, auto-scaling of nodes. You could do that with CloudForms through some scripting as well. Where do you see CloudForms living, and do you foresee a lot of their components being built into Grafana, Prometheus, the operator framework, and eventually CloudForms moving to be purely OpenStack, or do you see CloudForms living on in future?
So CloudForms has a fantastic roadmap. That sector of the industry, when you look at ServiceNow and you look at App Dynamics and all these other awesome things out there in the market, they're SaaS services, right? There's a pressure to become a SaaS service when you're in that industry. So CloudForms is in the middle of transitioning to also offering itself as a SaaS service from Red Hat to do your monitoring, just like ServiceNow would. In that process, they've really turned to all the product teams and asked us to take more ownership of our individual management. And so you saw in 3.11 that we shipped Prometheus to replace Hawkular and that other older solution. So we've completely moved to Prometheus to do the event management and the monitoring. It's dev preview right now to have metrics in 3.11, so if you want to see it, just give me an email and we'll get you in the dev preview program. You can see metrics. That's the replacement for the showback feature and chargeback feature in CloudForms. So as of 4.0, we think we've pretty much replaced all the user experiences that somebody would have turned to. You mentioned auto-scaling. That will also be in 4.0 native to Kubernetes, so you won't need something outside of Kubernetes doing that for you. And then CloudForms would be that SaaS service that OpenShift sends telemetry up to, that is sort of the aggregator of all these different systems that you might have. So that's the way it's going to pan out.
One more question way up here.
Hi. Is Docker will be also supported in next versions, or is it possible to, I don't know, swap it to Cryo using Ansible playbooks? Or?
I didn't hear the end of the question. You were asking if Docker is supported in 4.0?
Yeah.
No.
No. Okay, so it's still going Cryo then, yeah?
Yes.
But if I am now running OpenShift on Docker, so I need to do it manually then, change this runtime.
Well, if you're going to install OpenShift 4.0, you're going to run it on top of Cryo.
Okay, but if I want to upgrade it?
Docker daemon.
No, okay.
Why is different between Docker daemon and Docker, right? So
If you want to run Docker client, I'm sorry,
No, Docker daemon.
If you want to run Docker daemon, I guess you could run it in a container if you want.
Okay.
What do you need to run Docker daemon for, though?
No, the basic question is I'm currently running cluster, OpenShift cluster on the Docker runtime as default runtime. So if I want to upgrade it to, I don't know, for 4.0 or something, can I do this automatically using Ansible playbooks, or I need to do it manually to get rid of Docker if it's not supported?
Yeah, so to cross that boundary from 3.x into 4.x, we're going to use a migration utility. It won't be like an in-place upgrade that you've experienced from 3.9 to 3.10 to 3.11. We're taking a different approach to cross the major boundary. But on the Docker runtime question, look at all the Kubernetes distributions. They've all pretty much moved, and even Docker themselves have moved to using an alternative runtime there. Docker's using Containerd. There's Hyper.sh. There's 4 other ones that are out there.
The industry's moving to a CRI, and that's why CRIO is that's what CRIO is. So it's Kubernetes defined runtime. The problem is the Docker daemon has become it lacks performance that you need for running containers in production. So what's happened is Docker split. After CRIO was introduced, Docker decided that they had to compete against CRIO, and so they split Docker into two different daemons. They created a back-end daemon called Containerd, and there was a Containerd before then that was really for Docker Swarm, but they basically enhanced the CRIO or the Containerd to match what CRIO was doing. So what you see happening now is the industry is moving to two new container runtimes for running containers under Kubernetes, and that's Containerd and CRIO.
Thanks.
All right. One more question down here.
What options are there for running on-premise container registries? With OpenShift 3, you can run an OpenShift container registry. Are you planning on bundling Quay or an option for an on-premise registry with OpenShift 4?
Yeah, so in OpenShift 3.x, we had what we called the internal registry, and it wasn't very feature-rich when you compare it to other standalone, even our own Quay.io. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to bundle an internal one. 4.0 will be the exact same bundled one. Later in 2019, when we have time, we're going to start stripping features off of Quay and using that as a replacement for the internal. So we'll be using Quay at both, but the internal one will be less feature-rich that we're giving away with OpenShift. But we'll still maintain Quay, the full version of Quay, and we'll enhance it as a separate product that you can purchase. Quay is actually being open sourced quite soon, so that's another exciting project. We always hold true to our promise. Anything that we buy, we open source.
All right. Any more questions? Any other questions you can ask over a drink? I want to thank everybody who's come up on stage here today. There's a lot of time zone, jet lag. Some of them, when we get them to come over to do these community events, they also end up in tons of customer meetings. So I really appreciate you guys giving us your time today and staying here through the whole day. So thank you very much. Give them a big hand.